ascension forecast for Sunday, July 20th to Saturday, July 26th. So last week we had Saturn, the Lord of Karma, go retrograde, which of course is adding to this reflection, this revision, this review that we're having to go through before we get launched and catapulted in a new path, in a new direction. So of course, Saturn retrograded on the 13th and definitely gave us a little bit of a reality check. We were kind of sitting in the funk. There was a heaviness, a weight that essentially stemmed from the full moon in Capricorn that Saturn energy ruled over. But then just a couple of days later, having Saturn actually retrograde, a lot of that heaviness, a lot of that weight definitely was felt in the physical body. It feels like we're stepping back into time, back into situations and circumstances that we thought that we were done with. It feels like we're being kind of pushed back into old wounds that we thought we had healed. Now, of course, all of this is divinely scripted in order for us to review what needs to stay, needs to go. It does tend to feel like a little bit of a punishment, but of course, when you understand why all of these transits happen in the fashion in which they do, it's actually a huge opportunity to kind of deconstruct, to dissolve some of the aspects that are still alive and well that belong to the old world that the old version of self has built and created. We were sitting in that heaviness, sitting in that funk. Again, the physical body definitely being weighed down by that energy. We've had some major pop-offs on the Schumann resonance, which means that there's more energy, more light, more activations coming into this earth plane than we've ever experienced before. And most of the time, we need to slow the physical body down long enough to actually receive them. So although it doesn't feel good to be heavy and weighted and feel like you're 500 pounds trying to run underwater, it is absolutely necessary to slow the physical body down long enough to actually receive some of the light codes that are currently popping off in the cosmos. And of course, there's been a lot of pop-offs, specifically just over these last couple of days, mostly due to, again, the moon in Pisces energy kind of wrapping up this cycle. And again, with the moon in Pisces, the sun in Cancer, that's a lot of water. And all of that water energy not only had us feeling like we were drowning, but it definitely overwhelmed us with a lot of emotion that many of us definitely weren't really wanting to process. It's hard when you're feeling down and you're feeling kicked and you're feeling punished by the cosmos to hold such a high vibration and frequency and to hold that positivity. And I think many of us have been challenged this week with that particular task. The last quarter moon just popped off in Aries energy here last evening. That last quarter moon, of course, is illuminating and revealing to us where it is that we've had enough, where it is that enough is enough. We're done messing around. Something's got to give. And of course, the last quarter moon of any lunar phase is highlighting what we have to release, what we have to let go of, what we have to remove. And we are under that Aries energy, fired up. We're ready to do what needs to be done. We are using our negativity. We're using our not so great mind space and emotions at this particular point in time as motivation and fuel in order for us to do something different. Push needs to come to a shove, right? And so we are definitely at this quote unquote breaking point, which I'll talk about here in just a second. We're coming to this breaking point at a beautiful point in the calendar. And under this last quarter moon in Aries, you best believe that a new fire has been lit, not only in our heart space, but under our ass. And now we definitely need to boss up and do all of the things. We'll talk about that in just a second. Now, as I'm coming to you here Friday evening, first of all, thank you so much for being with me. Thank you for being here in the chat. But we just had Mercury go retrograde at the wee hours of the day. And so Mercury essentially is just standing still right now. He has, and again, I like to use this analogy because it makes a lot of sense to me and hopefully it'll make some sense to you. When Mercury stations retrograde, it's as if he realizes in that moment that he got drugged, he got roofied. You know, when you're having a good time and everything is good and copacetic and everything is just good vibes, and then all of a sudden the world starts shifting and everything starts spinning and you realize a weird sensation taking over your body and you're like, damn, those drugs are kicking in and they're kicking in hard. This is where Mercury's currently at. And the flood of emotions coming from being in Leo energy, that heart activation, is just overwhelming us, and our mental plane is not operating in the capacity in which we're used to. And so this in itself, just being at a pause, just being at a standstill while shit has already been hitting the fan, it makes us feel like we're in a state of paralysis. It makes us kind of add more anxiety than there needs to be. And it kind of pressurizes us to think that things are falling apart at a rate that actually isn't as accurate as we feel it to be. Everything is over exaggerated when you're on drugs. Everything is a more sensory experience when you're on drugs. And essentially, Mercury just had the drugs kick in a very violent way. So we need to be patient with that. So this week, we're going to be wrapping up Cancer season, and I want you to really celebrate that, okay? Here's the thing. Cancer season, because it's very karmically connected, it's a cardinal energy, it is the changing of the signs, the changing of the guard, the changing of the season, so to speak. We always have a hard time in Cancer season. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it, okay? I don't care what your placements are, don't care what you're going through in life. Cancer season always turns the volume all the way up on just being emotionally, physically, mentally, mostly spiritually exhausted, okay? We are nearing the final degrees of Cancer season, which means that there is going to be an intensity being amplified and magnified to the utmost degree in order for those endings and closures to be so in our face, for us to feel so exhausted, for us to just reach that breaking point, because the sun is going to be shifting into its rulership in Leo energy, which is basically going to bring us all back to life. But we have to be on essentially death's doorstep, so to speak. And I don't mean that physically, although some people are going through it physically. We have to be at that death door, that deathbed, that breakdown, breakthrough point before we get restored, refreshed, renewed, and revived. So Leo season is always giving us that new life force energy. We all have to be very grateful to that. We all have to be very open to that. But this season is going to be a little bit different. And I do want to take a moment to kind of talk about that. I should probably wait until I start rattling off the ascension symptoms, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to flow with it right now. So please forgive me for derailing my own TED Talk here. Leo season, the sun rules over Leo energy. So the sun is in its rulership, and there's an amount of, let's call it royalty, that we all kind of tap into, especially where our real, true, raw, authentic soul source is coming from. And so there is this, this reviving energy that always takes over when the sun moves into Leo season. And a lot of that is just because we're out of the emotional ocean that Cancer season throws us in. And because Cancer season is very much about our inner world, the sun in Leo energy cracks open that crab shell that Cancer season is very much represented by, and a new version of self comes out to play. Now, we've been working on this new version of self. The reason why I think this Leo season is going to be different, here's a couple of reasons. First of all, we have a shitload of planets currently in a retrograde. Retrograde is a reflection. It's a review. It's a reassessment. We're not going into the future. We're not moving forward. We're fixated on the past. Why? Because we need to know how we ended up here in order to figure out what we shouldn't do or what we need to avoid doing to make sure that we don't repeat the same path, the same patterns that landed us here in the first place. So the review of all of these retrograde planets giving us an option and an opportunity to do all the re-words. So first we have to reflect, review, revisit a couple of things, revise our plans, reformat, restructure, rebuild, recalibrate, realign. We have to do all of these reassessments, reanalyzations, if you will. And because a lot of the heavy hitting planets are in brand new energies that they've never retrograded in before with each other, this is like new territory, right? We haven't gotten this far in the video game as far as humanity is concerned. Now, okay, so first of all, this Leo season going to be a little bit different just because of the planets being in retrograde. Here's another reason why I think this Leo season is going to be different. We are essentially beginning Leo season, which stabilizes us because it is a fixed sign. Fixed signs always follow cardinal seasons because cardinal seasons, such as Cancer that we just went through and are currently going through, it tosses everything up in the air. Like, we're at our breaking point. We realize what we can't continue to do. We realize where it is that we are a new version of self still operating with the old version of self programming, and that's a no-go. But the fixed seasons are here to help us get through the transitional change. And then, of course, after a fixed season takes place, we're into a mutable season again. Mutability means that we need to be flexible enough in order to then adjust and improve some of the things that we are going to be solidifying, some of the things that we are going to be restructuring through the fixed season. The reason why I think this Leo season is also going to be a little bit different is because we enter into Leo season, which is normally bright. The sun is shining bright. There's a lot of light. There's a lot of rejuvenation. There's a lot of, renewal in our soul and our spirit. This time around, we're going to be in the dark phase of the new moon. And literally, the moon is in her rulership in Cancer energy when the sun is at the 29th critical crisis karmic degree of that Cancer energy, just hours before the sun shifts into Leo energy. And so what I'm getting at is, first of all, we have the luminaries, the sun and the moon, both in their rulerships for this transition to take place. So emotionally speaking, and in our physical ego avatar bodies, that's where the sun rules over, is our physical bodies, our identity bodies. They're going to be in their brightest, strongest force and power fighting each other, right? The new moon, the dark phase of the moon, is where the endings are so in our face that we're paralyzed, we're defeated, we're exhausted, we want to curl up in a ball, we want to set this one out. And to have the sun move into its rulership, where it's usually, I'm going to say pedal to the metal, the foot to the floor, with that gas just being kind of pumped through us because there's this get up and go that we should be feeling, that's going to be put on pause. And I think it's going to make for some very interesting events popping off here this week on the greater, grander global stage. I also think that there's going to be a major rewriting of the storyline that we thought we were living. And I think that there's definitely going to be a destabilization taking place here midweek, not only in our physical realms, but in our soul and spiritual realms as well. Now, it has to happen. It's a good thing. We are going to have the new moon pop off in this Leo energy at 2 degrees, 9 minutes on the 24th. Another thing about that, typically speaking, we do have a little bit more time to settle into a brand new season before we have that new moon. And for the last couple of seasonal cycles, we've been noticing that the new moon is actually taking place relatively early into the season, which is interesting because it does give us the whole season to be building upon that particular lunar energy. But it's also a very interesting dynamic because we don't get time to acclimate to the zodiac season and learn the particular shadow parts and light part lessons in order for us to set those new intentions under that new moon in Leo. So essentially, we are coming into the darkest phase of the darkest season. And just when we are expecting that light to emerge and to bring us all back to life, we're in the dark phase of the moon. And the new moon in Leo, I think, is going to be the trigger and activation point for the resurrection of our authentic soul self to come out to play and save us from the drowning that we're currently going through, the punishment, the endings, the closures, the exhaustion that we're currently going through, especially in these final degrees of Cancer season. So the new moon taking place in Leo at 2 degrees is a brand new chapter. 2 degrees, we're barely scratching the surface of this new energy that we're getting to play with. The Leo energy, yes, it is the heart and soul of the zodiac, but it is essentially our authentic soul self asking to be fully expressed through the physical ego avatar. And so we have been working on this new version of self, but all of these planets in a retrograde are helping us to refine what that new version of self is. And I think that just the way that all the planets are moving at the time that the sun actually takes its throne in its rulership in Leo energy under the dark phase of the moon, that the moon is in her rulership, in this Cancer energy, it's very strange to me. that the luminaries are in their placements of power at this particular point where essentially we are passing the baton over to Leo season. So I think that the new moon in Leo energy is going to be the revitalization, the renewal of our soul and spirit that we're anticipating taking place with the sun moving into Leo. It's just put on pause. Like we're delaying, I'm not saying we're delaying Leo season, but it's going to feel like we're delaying the season because of that dark force energy that we have to sit in due to the dark phase of the moon. But the new moon in Leo, I think, is going to trigger and activate, and here's the kicker, and don't hold me to this, but I think we're actually going to have some good heart activations taking place under this influence. And I think we're actually going to have some excitement restored. And I think we're going to have some faith restored. And I think that we're going to have creative solutions provided to us from some of the things that right now we feel so hopeless about. And I really hope that I'm right this time around, because Lord Jesus knows we all need a little bit of a lifesaver thrown at us while we're trying not to drown out here in the emotional ocean. So let's talk about some of the ascension symptoms that we can expect to pop off here this week due to the fluctuation in the energies. So we broke records last week with the energy spikes coming in through the Schumann resonance and, of course, impacting the electromagnetic frequencies of this earth plane and, of course, of our bodies as well. We are going to continue to have those energy spikes because we are still in a karmic season. And as we near to the final degree, specifically the 29th critical crisis karmic degree, if you're over on my Patreon, you would know that anytime we have a planet at this 29th degree, the volume gets turned up in this particular matrix shit show. And we definitely are going to be put in a very, I'm going to call it more intense and amplified situation this week, just because this has been unlike any Cancer season that we've ever had. This has been one for the books, if I do say so myself. And karmically speaking, again, being at wit's end, being at a breaking point, feeling like you're being kicked while you're down, this is definitely going to put a lot of people in a lot of bad situations and circumstances here this week. And my hope is to keep us all ahead of that, anticipating it. Does it make it, fun? No, absolutely not. But when you can't anticipate a shit show and you're ready for it, suddenly you're able to ride those waves a little bit better than if it were to have taken you off guard. So I did talk about already, and I don't really want to, just bore you with repeating myself here, but the endings and the closures that are so in our face right now, many of us are, we're human. Our backs need to be against a wall before we're willing to open up and make a change. That's just the natural survival programming of these physical bodies. And we are going to feel our back be pushed up so hard against this invisible wall here this week that it's going to be a breaking point for many. I know many people are in some tough situations right now, either losing people that they love, losing things that they love, losing themselves. There's all kinds of quote unquote loss. But this is what happens in a karmic season, because the things that we are quote unquote losing, they've run its course. We've learned all that we can from those particular aspects. And as humans, we are conditioned and programmed to hold on to everything that we acquire for dear life. Like the hoarder gene is very alive and well in many of us. And, we hoard physical, materialistic things. We hoard people. We hoard pain. We hoard memories. We hoard a lot of things. And that junk and that gunk needs to be removed. And sometimes we need to be kind of destabilized in a very harsh kind of way in order for us to let go of some of those attachments. Now, I'm not trying to minimize that. Loss is loss. Grief is grief. Endings and closures hurt. I'm not saying that, it's not an emotional thing, that it's not a hard thing to deal with, but things are only going to be intensified here this week. And sometimes you need to sit in that darkness to truly appreciate the light. And the light is coming. The sun in its rulership in Leo energy always restores the light. I just think it's going to be a little bit delayed just due to that dark phase of the moon. However, new energy is coming. New light is coming. New hope, new faith, new wishes, new dreams, new desires are coming. They're just going to be put on pause for a little bit longer than we would like. But the endings and the closures are definitely going to be weighing very heavily on our chest space. I know I talk about heart activations quite frequently in pretty much every forecast, but you got to understand that heart chakra is what connects our higher selves to the physical body. And so a lot of the heart chakra activations are very much needed in order to clear out that chakra, constantly be removing the emotional residue, the junk and the gunk from that particular chakra, because if that chakra closes up, if that shuts down, not only are you disconnected from your higher self, but your physical self is likely going to be in a pretty hard situation and circumstance as well. Our life force energy comes through that heart chakra. We have to make sure that that heart chakra is filtering the energies as clear and with as much grace and ease as possible. And so that's why there's always the heart activations on my list of things to talk about. I would say that the first part of this week is going to be hard heart activations where grief and sadness and disappointment and spiritual and emotional exhaustion are concerned. I do think that the new moon in Leo is going to give us a different heart activation, meaning we're going to have a rapid heartbeat once that energy starts flowing in. Like I previously mentioned, I think we might actually get some happy days, some happy, exciting, inspiring, creative type of heart activations, but they're not going to happen until that new moon in Leo. And technically speaking, we need the sliver of the moon to be visible in the night sky once again before we come out of that dark phase of the moon. Now, towards the end of the week, the moon is going to end up in Virgo energy. And typically speaking, when the moon is in Virgo, we all have a hard time. We have a hard time because the moon in Virgo is analyzing, right? The good, the bad, the ugly. The who and the what needs to stay, needs to go. It is a reassessment, if you will, on where we need to make the adjustments in order to make the improvements, in order to actually be able to manifest the good energy that is coming into our heart space with this new moon in Leo. So I think it's going to be split down the middle. And again, midweek, we're looking at, if we're looking at the 23rd, that is the transitional day between the sun moving into Leo on the 22nd and the new moon in Leo taking place on the 24th. So there's going to be this weird void that we're sitting in. And as we've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks with the moon doing all of these weird ass, long ass void series, people don't respond very well when we're sitting in a void. Nobody likes to be put on pause, especially when you're drowning and there is a little bit of hope and a glimmer of, rescue and revitalization off in the distance. Nobody wants to be put on pause during that transition, but we're going to. And that transition is going to highlight for us because Mercury is now retrograde in this Leo energy. This is going to highlight for us where it is that we have some rewriting to do, some recoding to do. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, we're in Leo energy. That's the storyteller of the zodiac. We are essentially with, Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries energy, revisiting and revising who this new version of self is and what this new version of self wants and dreams and desires for themselves. And of course, reassessing the physical realm that the old version of self is built and why this new version of self isn't operating in the old realm in reality as, functionally as we would like. Again, this is another opportunity to further remove and eliminate and release the aspects that are kind of holding up the process. But we're rewriting our own, not only identities, but our own stories, the stories that we tell ourselves. Now, specifically with our pain and trauma stories. And let me just say that the pain and trauma story that we've been telling ourselves is such a huge part of the old version of self, because many of us have created an identity out of our pain and our suffering, out of our wounds, out of our trauma, that we don't know who we would be without them. But part of this healing process is realizing that you are not your pain, you are not your trauma, you are not the wounds that got triggered and activated out of your situation and circumstance. Who you are is the version of self that is able to take that shitty hand that you were dealt and to play it to your best of your ability. Now, if you are sick, if like myself, I am chronically disabled, I've shared this before, I live with what is called the suicide disease, which means that I wake up every day and try not to kill myself or anyone else due to the pain surging through my body, okay? I don't complain. I don't bitch about it. I don't cry about it. I don't whine about it. I would love for this to not be part of my day, let alone who it is that I am and who it is that I had to become because of it. That being said, can we just remove physical ailments? Well, we're working on it. That's why we're going through this ascension process. We're working on healing those particular memories, that energy. We're releasing that memory stored in our physical body. But we can't continue to tell ourselves the same old sad sob story and then, decide that we're not that person anymore, but yet we're telling ourselves that we are that person anymore. We have this new version of self. We have new wants, needs, and desires, but we're still operating from the old programming. So something's got to give. And Mercury's retrograde this time around, I think with the other planets that are already retrograde, this is the time to rewire the brain. This is a time to take a good look at the bullshit stories, not only that you tell yourself, but that you tell other people in trying to shape and mold who it is that you are and how it is that you're being seen in the world. We all have an opportunity this time around to flip that particular narrative, to flip that script, and to stop telling stories that don't align with who it is that we have become. Now, whether they're still a part of our journey, of course they are, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to bring them into the present day each and every single opportunity that we get. And so the big part of Leo season, specifically while Mercury is retrograde in this Leo energy, taking us into mid-August, is that we're going to be rewriting those stories. And as we're rewriting those stories, we let go, we release, we put to bed, we karmically disconnect from who it is that we had to be when those stories were accurate, when they were applicable, when they were alive and well in the time period in which they were actually active in. But if we keep telling the same old story of our past self to our present self, we aren't a new version of self. We're just trying to be somebody different, telling ourselves the same old stories and operating programs. And so that's got to give. Now, all of this, of course, has to come to a head in order for us to realize it. And we're humans, so it has to come in a painful way. It has to create some sort of discomfort in order for us to realize it. And because we have to wait till July 31st when Mercury retrograde essentially bumps into the sun and they have their conjunction, which not only marks the halfway mark of Mercury's retrograde, but it downloads us with the clarity that we're struggling to gain in this first half of Mercury's retrograde. So typically speaking, we're going to be more negative. We're going to be more pessimistic. We're going to be focused on all the things that are wrong. In the first part of Mercury's retrograde, we have that conjunction with the sun on the 31st. The halfway mark is over. That's when we pivot. That's when we start orienting to the positives. That's when we start flipping the script. That's when we start kind of re-editing the storylines that we're going to be fully immersed in from now until the 31st. They're going to be painful. They're going to be painful memories. They're going to be painful stories. It's going to trigger and activate a lot of things that we want to be done with. And when the 31st comes and we pivot with our mental plane, and we start orienting to how we're going to fix it and what's going to be better, and we start focusing on the positives, that's when the coding of this new version of self will change as well. But we're not there yet. And this week, nobody likes transition. Nobody likes being in between the old and the new. Nobody likes being, again, thrown out into the emotional ocean. We are tired AF of treading water, trying to keep our head above water so we don't drown. We can see land off in the distance. That's Leo season. And we know that the sun is shining beautifully on that beach of sand that is going to bring us back to reality and give us a break with our tired ass legs treading water. And the universe puts us on a pause, right? We're not going to do well. I'm just saying there's good things coming out of it. But right now, this week, we have to be highlighted to the darkness, to the endings, to the closures, to what isn't working, to the breakdown before we're going to find ourselves on the other side of this transition and be renewed in our hope and our faith and our spirits and our positivity and our ability to stay positive, because this week just ain't it. So, like I said to you, the reason for this pause is that, yeah, the sun is moving into its rulership. Yeah, it's taking the throne, but it's taking place through the dark phase of the moon. And to have those luminaries in their rulerships at the exact same time while we're sitting in the darkness of that void is definitely going to ruffle up some trapped shadow parts of the old version of self that need to rise to the surface of our awareness so that we can, again, eliminate them, release them, purge them, get rid of it. So the lack of clarity that we have right now, of course, we want clarity. We want to figure everything out, but it's not happening. And so if you could find yourself in a place of flow and surrender there, because that's the only answer that we have right now on how to deal with this particular energy. If you can find yourself in a place where you're not pushing for clarity to happen and you just sat back and observed where you're gaining clarity in all the wrong ways, let me explain that for a second. Sometimes I think that when you talk about clarity, it's like we're expecting this ray of sunshine to just, the clouds are going to crack open and the sun is going to beam down on us. And there's going to be like some sort of angelic vibrational music that plays in the background, like, wah! That wasn't a very angelic sound, forgive me, but I'm trying to do the best, especially with the construction going on in the background. I do apologize. But there's going to be this like illumination. I think everybody thinks that clarity comes in and it just feels good and it's just like praised and it's just like gravy. It's almost like the universe is handing you this beautifully gift wrapped package, beautiful bows just shimmering. It's almost too nice of a present to even want to open. That's not how we gain clarity, guys. And I want you to be prepared for this week because clarity is going to come by all the things that aren't working. All the shit shows. When the shit hits the fan, that's clarity. That's clarity on what we don't want, what we no longer want to experience, what we cannot tolerate anymore. And this is the breakdown before the breakthrough week. Transitions always do this. And so when I say to you that there is a lack of clarity, man, we want that clarity, but we want it in the beautiful form in which I just kind of described, where the clouds open up and the sun shines down and we're gifted with that beautiful, gift wrap bow package. If you're looking for clarity that way, you're not going to get it this week and you're going to be further disappointed and exasperated when you don't get that beautiful package delivered to you. Now, if you want to open up your mind and flip the script a little bit and be open to receiving clarity, by observing what is no longer working anymore, what you've had enough of, where shit is hitting the fan, you can gain a lot of clarity this week, but it's through what's not working instead of what is. Okay. So again, the universe is just serving us up a bunch of crap on our plates this week so that we reach that breakdown point, because as humans, again, we need to have our backs against the wall. We need to be totally exasperated, exhausted, and done. Like done before we're actually done. Then we're more open, willing, vulnerable to accept certain terms, accept certain circumstances, and finally be prepared to leave things where they're at and move the F on. That's where we're at. So, with that, I just want to walk you through, like, did you ever walk through a situation and a circumstance that you ended up totally throwing your hands up in the air and being like, I'm done. F this shit. I'm done. I'm walking away. Have you ever gotten there with good situations and circumstances? Have you ever gotten there having a good time in life? Have you ever gotten to that point when things were going your way? And the answer is no. So why I'm saying this is because there's an emotional volatility coming at each and every single one of us this week, where our boundaries are being tested, our emotional foundation is being tested, situations and circumstances that we're desperately trying to hold on to and make work are being tested in order for us to get to the point where we are willing to let go of the death grip of trying to control and micromanage and force things and make things happen, that we're willing to let that go and throw our hands up in the air and be like, you know what? I'm done. I surrender, right? We should be learning how to surrender before we force ourselves into situations and circumstances that literally break us down. We should know how to do that, but we don't do that. We're humans. And so again, I'm bringing this up because we're in the final degrees of Cancer season. You can't get any more emotionally volatile than the dark shadow parts of an unhealed Cancer. We are in a transitional phase where the light is off into the distance and we're running to it, but then we're put on pause, which is frustrating as F. And there's just a lot of things that need to be triggered and activated in these final days of Cancer season before we're going to surrender in the way that we should have probably about a month ago. So we need to get to that I'm done, hands up in the air, F this shit type of vibe. We have to get there some way. I think many of us are probably at that particular juncture here right now, but we're exhausted. And honestly, many of us are in a state of, I don't care. I don't care. Now, if you find yourself in that situation, all you're doing is disassociating from reality in order to protect yourself. We're not going to shame you for that. You do care. The reason why you feel the way that you feel is because you care too much. And so boundaries, Cancer season, boundaries are very much needed in order for us to protect our emotional inner realm so that, again, we find ourselves in a place of empowerment so that it doesn't matter what's going on in the external realm. We can do what we can do to soothe ourselves back into a place of safety, security, and stability in our inner realm. We're going to have a lot of option and opportunity to do just that here this week because our nervous system is going to be so overwhelmed and overstimulated that we are on the edge, on the breaking point. We need to get there. We're already there, and you think that you're there. You can't imagine anything else happening to push you further off of that edge, but I need you to keep an open heart and an open mind because this story is not done just yet. Now, all of these ascension symptoms, all of these energy spikes coming into our realm, all of this is to help us be able to channel the energy of the cosmos in a way that does not debilitate us. Now, many of us are still very debilitated by these ascension symptoms. Again, I'm going to take this opportunity to shamelessly plug the book that I wrote specifically for this ascension process because we talk about how this isn't woo-woo. This isn't spirituality as much as it is the nervous system, right? You're awakened because the correlation between being neurodivergent, being, I'm going to say, traumatized from an early age, and being in a situation and circumstance where your physical body can't handle any more excitement or any more energies, all of that is the same group. And all of the commonalities is the nervous system. And the nervous system is responding to high amounts of energy that we aren't comfortable in actually, taking into our bodies. Thus, the ascension symptoms, thus why we feel disabled when energy spikes. Because of this past week of us reaching a number on that Schumann resonance that we haven't reached before, setting a brand new record for this solar cycle that we're in, I would say that, the boot camp is about to accelerate in a big way. And I would say that we are going to really be pressurized with learning how to soothe. This is what the whole thing is that we have to learn how to take care of ourselves and soothe our nervous system when it gets heightened. So again, there's a lot of resources in my book to talk about that. There's crystal healing, there's vibrational healing, there's breath work, there is, visual meditation, there's guided meditation, there is tapping, there's all of these things. And in the book, I go through, understanding where the energy spikes are coming from, the planets that are responsible for them, what that does to the physical body, the symptoms that produces, and what you can do about it. And so this week we got to go heavy because Cancer season is about how we nurture and nourish ourselves back to a place of health and wellness. When your central nervous system is fried due to, being neurodivergent, due to having a painful and traumatizing childhood and past, our central nervous systems are fried. And this is what activates this, spiritual awakening, is when the physical body can't take any more, let's call it blunt force traumas, energetically speaking. And, the Kundalini spirit wakes up and starts channeling through the meridian channels of your physical body, and your body hasn't been trained to harness that much power. This is what this is all about. And so we're going to be overwhelmed and overstimulated in our physical body here this week. And our job is to soothe the central nervous system the best way that we know how. And again, if you need help, if you need assistance, if you need resources, not only jump over to my Patreon or just download the book, order the book, get that information available and accessible to you so that you understand what's going on and you don't allow the panic and anxiety to take over that central nervous system and lead the way. We have to calm it. That being said, our headspace is super loud because, of course, we got the king of the jungle reviewing life here, and I mean Leo energy, in case you didn't catch that, but Mercury being retrograde in Leo energy is very loud. You can't get any louder than the king of the jungle. And the negative narrative is very loud because, again, until July 31st, we're going to be looking at life through a more negative, more pessimistic lens. Not only does tech kind of get all effed up in a Mercury retrograde, but our brains are going to be fried. And, you know, this is the first Mercury retrograde that we've had with Uranus and Gemini energy. And that in itself, those two placements all in themselves is enough to burn our physical, mental, and emotional body out. And we really need to double down on the resources, the practice, the tools that we have in our energetic toolbox, so to speak, that we need to tap into when the overwhelming energy puts us in a state of physical paralysis. So tech is going to malfunction. Our brain is going to malfunction. I know many of us are already having issues in our throat, in our jaw, in our mouths, with our teeth. You know, there's a lot of fire, right? That's where the fire energy is stored right now. Mercury in Leo is fire energy. And so inflammation is popping off in those particular chakras in that particular area of our body. Of course, our head is going to be spinning. Of course, our ears are going to be ringing. Of course, our eyes are going to be blurry. We're having a hard time seeing the forest past the trees. We're having a hard time seeing how we're going to get the F out of this situation. Again, the more you force trying to think, the worse off you're going to be. The lesson here is to observe. Observe and don't absorb, okay? Especially in the final days of this Cancer season. We're going to be oversaturated with emotions, and we definitely don't want to be absorbing all of those emotions, and specifically the emotions of other people. Now, when the sun moves into Leo energy, even though it is in the dark phase of the moon, we are going to be dried off from this emotional oversaturation very quickly. I do think that it is going to take towards the end of this week and probably moving into the following week before we're going to feel that fire energy of Leo kind of renew, refresh, and restore us. But it is the light at the end of what has been a very dark tunnel. And I think we all need to have the attitude of gratitude for that. So guys, I think that's all that I want to talk about for this week. Of course, you know, long list of ascension symptoms coming at us again. Transitional times in the calendar are never fun. Switching out of a cardinal energy to a fixed sign always has its bumps and bruises. Switching from a water sign to a fire sign is always welcomed. We can't wait to get out of the water. We want to get dried off. We want to get new clothes on, dried off, get all kind of cozy. And then we want to actually tap into some playful energy, some creative energy, some happy energies. Let's all look forward to that. So I thank you so much for tuning in. I send you nothing but love, and I will talk to you soon.